گفتی آقا چیز بیا
So what happens now?
بگو بیا دیگه بگو ما آنلاین آره بگو بیا الان تو پیج ما چیز بیا
So what
excuse me
happens?
So what happens now? خب ما الان منتظر آقای روسیم که بیان یکم حالشون مثل که اوکی نبودش چون که خب سلام اومدن
Okay, good. We've got each other. Hello again.
Hello. Okay. Let me take my hands free.
Okay.
If my voice is okay, I can speak.
Okay. All right.
So
We've got to stop meeting like this, you know.
Okay. دوستان به من بگید که صدای من خوبه. اگه خوبه دیگه من هندزفری وصل نکنم.
You're going to do what?
خوبه. خیلی خوب. میگم okay, it's good. The sound is good. خب دوستان عزیز من سلام میکنم. ما امشب قرار گذاشتیم با آقای روز که من فارسی صحبت کنم و ایشون هم که صحبت میکنن فارسیشو بگم که بهتر باشه. ببینیم امشب چه جوری میشه. ببینیم شما دوست دارین یا نه. خب Professor Ruse, I want to speak at first I introduce you for our audiences in Persian. Okay?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Wait a minute. Okay. آقای روس متخصص در زمینه داروینیسم هستن، فیلسوف برجسته علم هستن و بیشتر شهرتشون هم به خاطر آثاری هست که در زمینه علم و دین دارن. به خصوص آفرینشگرایی و تکامل. و یکی از اسمشون هم مثلا به همین نام گذاشتن. توضیحات زیادی برای آقای روس دادن اینکه ایشون سردبیر مجله فلسفه زیست شناسی هستن و کتاب‌های زیادی دارن که آیا یک مسیحی میتونه داروینی باشه، در این حال دین خودش رو حفظ بکنه، ایمان داشته باشه و در این حال هم بتونه به نظری داروین اعتقاد داشته باشه. و یک کتاب دیگه دارن داروین رو جدی بگیری درباره زیست جامعه شناسی، توهم یا واقعیت، دیگه واقعیت و فلسفه تکامل انسان و اینکه ایشون مهمترین شخصیت تاثیرگذار در 60 سال اخیر تاریخ ایالات متحده هستن به دلیل اینکه ایشون تونستن مجاب کنن دادگاه رو که بایستی تکامل توی مدارس دولتی تدریس بشه. به خاطر همین ایشون خیلی مؤثر بودن در 60 سال اخیر و در حالی که خودشون خدا ناباور هستن بسیار میگن که من محتاط هستم، بسیار محتاط هستم و با خدا ناباوران امروزی که بهشون هم میگن ملحدان جدید از جمله دنیل دنت و از جمله آقای داوکینز به شدت باشون اصلا تاییدشون نمیکنن و میگن که اینها گویی که اصلا جایی حتی برای فلسفه ورزی هم باقی نگذاشتن. بعد دیگه بهتون بگم که آقای روس جدیداً هم این سری جدیدی که در نشر کمبریج چاپ شده 18 جلد فلسفه زیست شناسی که زیر شاخه هستش از یک مجموعه مهمتری که 57 جلد و نشر کمبریج برای معرفی علوم به تمام دنیا اینها رو نوشته. آقای روس خودشون هم سردبیر مجموعه فلسفه زیست شناسی هستن و هم نویسنده کتاب فلسفه کتاب انقلاب داروینی که من همین رو ترجمه کردم و نشر علمم جدیداً این رو چاپ کردیم. خب حالا ما میخوام که من سوالاتو گفتم فارسی بگم که همه متوجه بشن. آقای روز هم که صحبت میکنن من فارسیشو خدمتتون همون به صورت نسبی و حدودی براتون بگم. حالا بعدم فایل بذاریم که دیگه دوستان ناراحت نباشن. خب Professor Ruse, first question. سوال اول، نظرتون رو نسبت به زیست جامعه شناسی ویلسون بگید. زیست جامعه شناسی ویلسون که خود آقای ویلسون که دانش آموزای دانشگاه هاروارد هستن این کلمه رو ابداع کردن و خودشون برای اولین بار این رو به جامعه علمی معرفی کردن که یه زمینه در زیست شناسی هستش که رفتارهای اجتماعی رو بر اساس تکامل توضیح میده. خب خود آقای روز در دو تا از کتاباشون به اسم زیست شناسی توهم یا واقعیت و کتاب دیگرشون به اسم Is Science Sexist، یعنی که آیا تبعیض جنسیتی ریشه در علم دارد. خب من دیدم احساس کردم که آقای روز دارن نظرات ویلسون رو نقد میکنن، به خاطر همین بهتون بگم که راستی کتاب تبعیض جنسیتیشون بسیار کتاب پرمحتوایی هست و به شدت از مدارک مستند علمی استفاده شده. این کتاب توی اینترنت هم موجوده، هر کسی که بخواد میتونه رجوع بکنه. خیلی کتاب عالی هستش. پرفکت یور بوک. خب آقای روس و آقای ویلسون هر دوشون مقاله مشترکی رو با هم کار کردن تو زمینه همین زیست جامعه شناسی و خیلی با هم بحث کردن و دائم هی ایمیل می‌زدن و آخر سر به این نتیجه رسیدن که آقای هر دوشون روی این که تکامل اساس فهم اخلاق در موضوع پس توافق داشتن. فقط اینکه آقای ویلسون گفتن که تکامل باعث توجیه اخلاق میشه و آقای روس گفتن خیر. Okay, now Professor Ruse, you please speak about the first question and let me try to translate it for our audience. Okay, let's go.
Okay. So do you want me to go straight into the first question?
Yes.
Okay, well, first of all, let me say how privileged and happy I am to be doing this. And I want to congratulate you particularly because the way that you're showing that people of different countries, different sexes, different religions can nevertheless find some common theme, a common humanity. And in fact, not only do I want to say that at a personal level, but in fact, this leads me straight into my first question and my answer. And my first question is about sociobiology. And I want to start with Professor Edward O. Wilson of Harvard, who in 1975 published a major book, Sociobiology, The New Synthesis. And this is a book which is discussing evolution, evolutionary theory, but not just the physical parts, but the behavioral parts, what we do rather than what we are. Now, Wilson is a specialist on insects, particularly a specialist on ants. So Wilson has spent most of his professional career actually studying ants and their behaviors, which of course are very interesting because ants have a very complex caste system of the males, the females who are the workers, the queen, and all of these things. So Wilson was very interested in this, but then he extended his interest beyond the ants to mammals, to primates, monkeys, chimpanzees, and then finally to human beings. And what Wilson argued was that in order to understand human beings, then we must understand them as animals, but animals that have evolved through Darwinian processes of natural selection. And this is what he argued. And so to pick up with what I was just saying, he argued that, for instance, a very important part of being a human being is being a social being. We're not isolated, just living on our own, doing our own thing, but all the time we're interacting with family, with children, with friends. We go to the shop, we interact with the shop person, and all of these things. And that's why I said you and I are a perfect example of interaction. Why on earth would a woman in Iran and a man in Florida want to talk to each other? Because we're human beings and we're not some sort of oak trees or isolated or have no interest in other animals or anything. We want to interact. So this was Wilson's position, and I found it very attractive. However, it was quite controversial. Now, Wilson in no way wanted to argue that there are differences between, say, let us say, black people and white people. In fact, he was very careful not to do that. But he did want to argue that, for instance, there are significant differences between men and women and the way that they behave. And it's not just cultural. I mean, obviously, if you look at you and you look at me, we got culture. I don't have anything on my head, but you do. And why do you have something on your head? Because you're a woman in Iran, okay? So this is cultural, but I don't think there's anything biological. I don't think you're wearing it because your hair would fall out if you took it off. My hair's falling out, but that's a different matter. But obviously, Wilson wanted to say, for instance, that women are more given to nurturing, maternal, caring about people, whereas men tend to be show-offs and sprinting around and doing their thing and this sort of thing.
Please repeat your last sentence. Please repeat your last sentence. Last sentence.
Say it again.
Yes.
Well, I think what Wilson wanted to argue was that you see innate differences between males and females. For instance, I mean, you've got what, a boy and a girl, right? And I'm sure that as they grew up, you said, yes, you know, they are different. I mean, you know, the girls, it's not just that girls are brought up to be girls. Girls are girls, and boys do tend to be boys. And that's the way we are. Well, of course, as you can imagine, Wilson also wanted to argue that you get certain social structures, that it's not just chance that some people are the leaders and some people are the followers, that's not just training, but part of our innate abilities. Well, as you can imagine, a lot of people found these ideas very offensive, particularly in America, the feminists and also the Marxists, and particularly, and this was particularly interesting, the Jews. Now, why would Jews find this very upsetting? Because of Nazi Germany, that Nazi Germany picked out the Jews as different, as evil in some sort of way. And so there's a very strong, let us call it ideology, particularly amongst American Jews, that wants to say, no, there are absolutely no innate differences between men and, not only between men and women and old and young, but between, let us say, Jews and Gentiles or anything like that, that this is all at most cultural and not biological. So it was very controversial. Now, I myself am a very committed Darwinian, and I felt that what Wilson had to say was very, very important. I thought that what Wilson had to say was a particularly insightful commentary on humankind, because I want to say a very important part of our understanding about ourselves is that we are monkeys, modified monkeys, that we have in fact evolved up from the apes, if you like. So I was very attracted to this. However, and I think this picks up further on your question, it didn't mean that I wanted to follow everything that Wilson wanted to say. And particularly when it comes to ethics or moral thinking, I thought that Wilson was wrong. Now, I should say that I've changed my mind somewhat about this. I still think that Wilson was wrong, but I think I was wrong too. And the way is this. Wilson said, in order to understand how we behave, not just how we behave, but how we behave morally, that, for instance, if you saw a child crying on the sidewalk, your first inclination would be to go over and pick up the child and look for its parents, look for its mother. What, are you lost? What can I do to help? Now, why do you do that? It's not your child, but it's because you feel that you should do this, that this is something right and proper for an adult to do. And I feel the same way. But why do we feel this way? Now, Wilson said it's all a matter of evolution. And at the time, I thought, no, I'm inclined to think that morality is something separate. Now, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a believer, but I thought that somehow morality is something like mathematics, written, as it were, for all eternity. And I now think that that's wrong. I think that Wilson is right to think that, yes, morality is part of being an evolved human being. However, whereas Wilson thinks that morality just evolves along with us, I'm inclined to say, no, we have morality, but I don't think, you see, what Wilson wants to say is if it's evolved, then it's necessarily good. And I want to say, no, not necessarily, because there are aspects of us which have evolved, which I don't think are good. For instance, our hatefulness, or let us say the fact, let's say men are always looking at women as sex objects. Now, I don't, I mean, I think that's what we do. I think I understand why that's what we do, because those men who did that are going to have more babies than those men who didn't. But it doesn't mean to say that it's morally right always to be doing this. And so I wanted to pull back some from Wilson and agree with him that morality is indeed a function of biology. But I wanted to say it's more complex than simply because it's evolved, therefore it is good. And so I think that's basically where I stand today. I want to say that Wilson and I have become very good friends and that we respect each other's ideas. So please understand, it's not like a religious dispute between the Protestants and the Catholics, or let us say Billy Graham's evangelicals and Muslims, or something like what Franklin Graham says about Muslims. You know, it's hateful. And I want to stress that Wilson and I are friends, that we disagree, but disagreement doesn't mean dislike or contempt. And of course, I would want to say that this is in itself a moral thing. I want to say that when Franklin Graham says that Islam is an evil religion, I think that's wrong. I mean, I'm not a Muslim. I do not believe that the prophet was the prophet, but that's a different matter. I can still respect it, just like you wearing something on your head. My inclination is to say, she's just doing it to make herself look more beautiful. It's not really, you know. But if you want to do it, I think that that's your right, and I respect you for doing it. Now, on the other hand, if you did something silly, you know, let us say like female circumcision, if you insisted on your daughter having female circumcision, I would be inclined to say, I don't care what your religion is. I think that what you're doing is wrong and should not be done. So understand, I'm not saying just because it's a different culture, therefore it's all right. But I do feel very strongly that we should interact. And as I say, this for me is very much part of my evolution, that we are social beings, and the important thing about being a human being is that we are social and that we respect and work with each other.
Write it. Let me write it. Let me 1 minute. ولی میگم که برای یه جلسه این دفعه کافیه، چون من خودم دفعه اولانه برای این دفعه دوستان، من چون که خودم برام جدید هستش، فکر میکنم حالا الان این 2 صفحه شد که چیزایی که من متوجه شدم از حرفای آقای روس رو براتون بگم. باز هر زمانی که باز دوباره دیدیم آقای روس هم حالشون بهتر باشه یه مقدار، چون که آقای روس فیبروز شدید ریوی دارن، به خاطر همین یه مقدارم الان کرونا ویروس ایشون خیلی نگران بود. الان خانمشون خیلی نگران بود، به من گفت خیلی چون ریه ایشون حساس هستش و فیبروز شدیدی دارن، ممکن هستش که برای سلامتیشون ضرر داشته باشه اینا. به خاطر همین بهتره که یکم هم ایشون فشارشون نباشه. باز ما هی در فواصل مختلف که مثلا حالا فواصل یه هفته 10 روز 15 روز سعی می‌کنم که با ایشون یه جلساتی بذاریم، هر بار یه سوال ازشون بپرسیم، هم بهشون فشار نیاریم، هم که ما خودمون اصلا راه بیفتیم ببینیم چه جوری انجام بدیم این کارو بهتره. Professor, if you are angry, we can stop question and answering, and let another questions for another sessions. Okay.
Okay, so now are we moving on to the next question now, or are we staying with this one?
No, we stay for the next session. Okay.
On to the next question about Darwinism and criticisms of Darwinism. Is that right?
No, today, not for today. Okay.
No. What are we going to do? What do you want to talk about now then?
Because it is very new for myself, and I'm afraid of not doing very well.
Oh no,
okay.
you're doing very well. And the thing is, can I say this? And this is very important. Nobody, the person who has never made a mistake is the person who has never done anything. So
yes.
that is, no, I'm a teacher, and that's the first thing I say to my students. This, show me the man or the woman who has never made a mistake, and I will show you the man or the woman who has never done anything. So I think we're doing very well.
Thank you very much.
I have huge respect for what you're doing. And if and if it takes a little while to get used to it or to do this, I hope that your audience, instead of saying, oh, she's not very good, would say, I hope your audience would say, goodness, I respect a woman, a young woman, who's got the guts to go out and do this. I couldn't do it, but she does it. And for that you see, is what I call part of being a real human being and a worthwhile human being. But it's also, if I might say so, and I'm an Englishman, I like to drink a cup of tea. I think it's a very Darwinian thing too. And this is an interesting point, and if I might make this, Jesus, in what is known as the Sermon on the Mount, that's where he gave his moral teaching. This is Jesus, when he said to his, you should love people, and you should care about them, and you should go and visit the sick, and you should go, and if people are in prison, you should go and visit them. And my father was a Christian, and once a week he would go to the local prison and talk to the prisoners and give them a cigarette and talk about soccer, because he felt that that's what Jesus wanted him to do. But Jesus also says, blessed are the meek. In other words, those who don't push themselves forward. And I want to say, as a Darwinian, as an evolutionist, I think Jesus was wrong there. I think the people I admire, not the bullies, not the pushy people, not people like Donald Trump who just push their way, but I admire the people who are prepared to have a go, who are prepared to make an effort to go that little bit further. And as a teacher, I feel very strongly about that. But also as a father, I've always said to my children, my love I give to you, my respect you have to earn. And they know what I mean. You've got to be prepared to go out and use what you've got to do that little bit more, that little bit better. So this is why, for instance, I'm very happy to do this with you, because I have a huge amount of respect for you. And I hope all the Iranians who are watching this will feel exactly the same way and say, I am so proud to be part of a culture which produces a woman like this. And I hope your husband, if he's there, is listening to every word I'm saying.
Thank you very much for your good words. I don't know. Okay, let's go to the next question. Okay, I say first in Persian and then you answer. Okay. یا میخواین من الان بپرسیم دوستان دوست داریم من الان فارسیشو بگم اول فارسیشو بگم دیگه پروفسور صحبت کنه پروفسور صحبت Okay, our audiences like that you speak about the next question and the translation will remain for later. Okay,
so the next question is about Darwinian evolution and how did evolution occur. Now, you've got to make a distinction between the fact of evolution and the processes. The fact of evolution is like the tree of life. Okay? The fact of evolution is like you start here at the hand here, and then you work up fish, reptiles, and then you've got birds. Where's my hand? Birds and mammals and this. So that's the fact, what happened. But now you've also got the processes. What makes it happen? So why does it happen? It's like being a doctor. First of all, if somebody comes in and says, I'm sick, first thing you want to know is, in what way are you sick? Are you throwing up? Or do you have a headache? Or can you not hear? Or do you have a stomach ache? So that's the fact. But then you look at the cause. Why are you throwing up? Is it because of something you ate? Or do you have something wrong with you? Why have you got a headache? Now, you're a Muslim, so you never drink. But if you drank alcohol, then one of if I've got a student who says, oh, I've got a terrible headache, I say, what were you drinking? Did you drink too much last night? Too much wine, too much beer? So you understand there's a difference. Fact, oh, I got a terrible headache. Reason, because I was drinking non-stop all night. So now that's the same with evolution. First, you've got the fact of evolution, the tree of life. But then why does it happen? Now, probably the best known and the most popular is known as LaMarchism, after the French biologist at the beginning of the 19th century, Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck. And Lamarck said, things change because we exercise or we do them, and then we pass them on. So let's suppose I'm a blacksmith. You know what a blacksmith is? You know, somebody who does horseshoe shoes, and a blacksmith is somebody who works with metal and makes things metal, like, for instance, the shoes that go on horses. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Now, the blacksmith is going to get really big, strong arms because every day he's doing this. He's not like me. I'm a professor. I've got really, really spindly little arms, as my wife is always saying. I should show you, but I do have a tattoo.
Please show us that. Yes. Your tattoo.
Look, I have a tattoo. There we go. There we go.
Yes. I have seen that on the website. Yes, I like it.
My wife wouldn't speak to me for a week when she discovered I'd done it. Does your husband have a tattoo?
No.
Do you have a tattoo?
میگه شوهر تا تاتو داره من اینجا تاتو کردم یه هفته خانم با من حرف نمیزنه.
Anyway, so
very good. Lizzie is right in all of the respects.
Anyway, Lamarck says you get the blacksmith gets really strong because he's bashing away, and then his children are born strong, and more and more. Like you, the blacksmith, Lamarck would say, this woman thinks a lot, she works, her brain gets bigger and bigger, so her children are cleverer already than her mother. And as it were, because you use it. Now, in fact, that's just not true. And Darwin came up with a different explanation. Darwin's theory says, no, there's always competition between organisms, because always you have more organisms being born than can survive and reproduce. And we know this. Population explosion. I mean, look at birds. Birds will have, say, 6 or 7 offspring, but we know only 2 or 3 are going to survive. And there's always, and why? Because the others will be eaten or fall sick or get caught in a storm or something. Now, says Darwin, why do some succeed and some lose? Let's say, why, for instance, do you have 5 children, 10 children, but
What?
why do you have 10 children, but your friend has none? Why? Well, because you're cleverer, you're more beautiful, you're whatever. That's right. You spend more time smiling at men than she does, and so you have lots of offspring. And what Darwin says is that's how the changes occur, because it's not that you pass on things you did like that, but that if you've got certain features, certain characteristics that make you better in the struggle, then these are going to be passed on. And so it's like a farmer. If a farmer wants, let us say, fatter pigs, the farmer breeds, well, okay, not in Islam. I guess you don't eat pork, do you? If a farmer wants sheep which have better, shaggier sheep with better coats, then what he's going to do is choose those sheep which have really good coats, and he's going to breed from them, and the others he's going to kill off and eat them straight off. So what you do is you're always selecting, choosing the ones that you want, and in a few generations what you're going to get naturally is sheep with thicker coats, with more fur, with more wool, and this sort of thing. And so this is what Darwin says, that it's not because God does it. It's not, God could be doing it, but it's not because God says, I want to change things right now. So when you had a baby, God said, boom, and your offspring was different, more, let's say, faster or cleverer or whatever, because God did a miracle. Darwin says, no. It's because you happen to have these features which made you more attractive and more likely to have children than somebody who doesn't. So, it's easy to see. If you've got 2 people, one is very social and likes to go out and meet people and this sort of thing, and one says, no, I don't want anything to do with anybody. I don't like human beings. Then the one who's social is much more likely to have children than the one who says, no. And so the next generation, the children are going to be those born of the social person, rather than, I don't want anything to do with them. And so this is how it's going to change. And this takes us right back to what I was talking about right at the beginning. Humans are very social animals. The thing about us is that we interact with each other. And what Darwin would say is, I expect that. The way that humans succeed is not by being big and strong. We are compared, let us say, to a tiger, we're very weak. Compared to an elephant, we don't have the strength. Compared to a bird, we can't fly. So what is it that humans have that make them so successful? That they're social and they work together. And so together, working together, they get much more done than they would if they were just on their own. And so then working together means that they're going to, as it were, interact, get married, have children, and those who do work together, those who are social, are going to be more successful than those who say, no, I don't want anything to do with girls, I don't like girls, or in your case, if you'd grown up and said, no, I don't want anything to do with boys, no, boys don't interest me, I know, well, okay, but I don't think you'd have, what did you say, you've got 6 children? How many children do you have? 2?
2, yes.
I thought you got 6. I thought it was 6. No? So anyway, what I'm saying is, the fact that you've got 2 children is not chance. It's because you're social, you met boys, you met men, you met your husband, you fell in love, but then you didn't just get fertilized and he disappeared. He stayed, he worked with you, he helped you to raise the children, and all of these things. We're social. But if, for instance, you were saying, no, I don't want anything to do with anybody or anything like that, you'd be much less successful. So this is Darwin's theory, what he called natural selection. And what he argued was that through the generations, we
Professor, because you have a sense of humor, I want to ask you something. Meanwhile, okay.
Humor. I haven't said anything funny at all today.
I want to ask you because the many young people are now these days don't want to marry. Don't want to marry. They decline marriage. What is your opinion here? Because it relates to your speaking here now. I think.
Well, you see, I've been a teacher for 50 years, and I know that one of the things that makes for a good teacher is being serious, but also being prepared to be funny sometimes, because learning is so much. I mean, we're having a very good conversation, very good, and we're talking about some very important things, but we're not, oh, this is really important, we must talk about, like a priest or an imam. This is serious. Don't laugh, little girl, because I'm talking about, I'm an important person. Nah, come on. Doesn't mean to say you can't learn things. Doesn't mean to say you can't have important discussion. But you do much better if you reach out and are able to interact.
Yes, thank you. Okay, go on your conversation.
Well, so what I want to say then is that for Darwin, there's no miracle about it. Now, we're going to talk about God later, but I do want to say that what Darwin offers is a scientific theory. He is not offering a theory which says God does not exist. He is not offering a theory that says Christianity is false or is. That wasn't what Darwin was interested in. That was not, as we say in English, where he was at. What Darwin wanted to offer was a scientific theory about how we evolved and how all animals and plants came about, including humans. And he wanted to show that this could happen by laws, by just processes, just like, oh, I've got a headache. You don't need God to explain why you've got a headache. You don't need, Christianity or whatever might say, you've got a headache because of what you did, and that was not a good thing. But that's another matter. But when you're explaining why you've got a headache, you're talking about physiology and nerves and all of these sorts of things. And similarly, when Darwin's talking about how we all came into being, he argues that it came about through natural selection, but that this was what we call in English an entirely natural process, that there was no need for God to get involved. But as I say, this is not to say it's denying God. It's just simply saying, this is not part of what we're talking about. It's just like, for instance, we're talking about these things now. If, for instance, you were an athlete and I was your trainer, we'd be talking about something else, about, what food you should eat so that you can go running on a long distance. Is it better to eat, 2 big meals a day or 6? But we're not, that's not wrong. But it's not what we're talking about now. We're talking about something else. And so I do want to emphasize that when Darwin puts forward his theory like this, he's not saying it's just something which is now going to disprove God. The God question, he's not talking about God. He's talking about us and how we've evolved. Now, one final thing. Of course, even today, especially today, there are people who are not comfortable, who worry whether or not Darwinism can work. And of course, theories don't just stand still. They develop, they evolve. And of course, as people, for instance, have discovered molecular biology and shown how the molecules work, they've been able to add new dimensions of understanding to what's going on. And of course, this is the sort of thing that Wilson was taking advantage of in his book on sociobiology. He was saying, now we have a much better understanding than Darwin did of social behavior, 100 years of studying organisms. So we have, and so I can put this into the theory in a way that goes beyond Darwin. It doesn't say Darwin was wrong, but it extends. And so, as I say, I think this is the way that science works.
Thank you very much. Okay, and the third question and the last question for this session. Okay, yes.
The third question is about free will, right?
Yes, free will. Yes.
Well, of course, this does start to bring religion in. Free will is a difficult topic at the best of times. Free will is the idea that we can do what we want. We have the choice to do it. For instance, you're interested in philosophy and Darwinism. You could, for instance, you were free. You could have been interested in cookery or something like that and said, I don't care about evolution or Englishmen or anything like that. What I'm interested in is how you cook meat or lamb or something like that. So we have freedom to choose these things. And the big debate, particularly for Christians, is where does free will fit into, well, for not just for Christians, but for religious people. They want to say, well, there are certain things we should do and certain things we should not do, but it's our choice whether we're going to do them or not. I mean, Buddhists don't believe in a God in the way that Islam, Muslims do, Christians do, Jews do. But Buddhists still believe in free will. There are good things you can do and bad things you can do. And so a Buddhist would say, let us say, Mother Teresa was a good person and Hitler was a bad person. So you still make these judgments. And I think a lot of the question, which now comes back to Darwinism and these things, is to what extent is science against free will? Does science mean that we have no free will? Because science says everything occurs according to laws, unbroken laws, and you can't change it. So, for instance, if I knew everything about you and had a complete science of you, I could predict what you're going to do for the rest of your life. I could say, yes, 3 years from now, the laws say that what she's going to do is she's going to, let us say, I don't know, take a bucket of paint and write rude things on the local mosque. You know, Muhammad was a silly old fool or something. Now, if you do that because you're determined, then do you have free will? Or did you have any choice? And of course, Darwinism wants to say you are what you are because of your biology. The way you behave, let us say, the way you behave to your husband and the way your husband behaves to you was not your choice. It was not your choice that you fall in love with men rather than with women. It was part of your biology. And it's not his choice that he falls in love with women rather than with men. It's part of his biology. We didn't have any choice about this. And so it seems that science, and Darwinism in particular, is saying there is no free will, but religion wants to say, oh, yes, there is. You had a choice. Would you, for instance, write rude things about Muhammad out on the local mosque or not? It's good not to do it. It's bad to do it. It was your choice. And when you do it and you're caught at it, the police or whatever say, you did wrong because you did not have to do that. And of course, even more interestingly, is that if you're sick and you can't think of what you're doing, then what the police can say is it's not your fault because you were crazy, you were bound by your illness, and you were not free. And so here's the big clash between freedom and science. Now, I'm not going to solve this in this discussion today, but I do think it's a little bit more complex, because certainly, I don't know about Islam, but certainly there's a very strong strain in Christianity, which says, oh no, freedom doesn't mean being able to do anything like that. Freedom means obeying laws and doing things according to laws. But that's nevertheless, freedom doesn't mean not being part of law. Freedom means not being oppressed. You are free to do what you do. Now, if, for instance, somebody came along and captured your children and says, okay, unless you write rude things about Muhammad on the mosque, I will kill your children. Well, what are you going to do? Oh, you say, give me the paintbrush, I'm going to do it. And of course, what a lot of Christians would say is, you're not free. That freedom does not mean that that you're bound by law. Freedom means you have the possibility of making the choice, whether or not you're bound by laws or not. In fact, if I said to you, I've kidnapped your children, and unless you write rude things about Muhammad, why would you say, oh, no, don't do that? Because of the laws which says a mother loves her children. A mother, it's not your choice whether you love your children. And if I force you to do this, then I want to say, then you're constrained, you don't have the freedom. So in fact, as I say, there's a lot of tension going on there. Now, on top of this, and I noticed this in your question, there are also problems in theology, particularly in Christian theology, which doesn't really have a lot to do with Darwinism. Is what you do we have any choice? If what we do, does it matter at all about eternal salvation? And a lot of Protestants, particularly, would say, no, everything we do doesn't really count. The only thing that counts is belief in God. In other words, if you believe in God, you'll be saved. And if you don't, doesn't matter what you do, you won't be saved. Whereas a lot of Catholics, particularly, and certainly I think a lot of Protestants like Quakers that I grew up with, would want to say, no, that's just not true. Mother Teresa was a good person, was more likely to go to heaven than Hitler because of what Mother Teresa did. Not because that she believed in. If Mother Teresa, if you met somebody who says, I don't believe in God at all, but let's say with the virus, a doctor who said, I don't believe in God at all, but I'm going to spend the next year working with people who've got the virus, and maybe dies. I want to say that's a very good person, as opposed to the person who says, no, I don't want anything to do with it. I'm just going to shut myself up and pray to God. I want to say, well, yes, but I don't think you're as good as a person as the atheist who went out and helped people. So, as I say, I don't really see this as being a scientific issue. I see this more as a kind of problem with religion. And I think this is a good note to start to bring our conversation to an end, I think often the difficulty in talking about science and religion is deciding what is a scientific question, what is a religious question, do they interact? Or maybe, really and truly, we should say, yes, there are problems, but it's got nothing to do with religion. Or there are problems, but it's got nothing to do with science. And let's see that, and let's try to work the things out from there. How's that?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor.
Well, I think we've taken almost an hour now. And what I think is I'd like to do it again. I hope we can do it again and cover some more questions. But I do think it's very helpful just to have some questions and to be able to answer just those, and you can translate them. And I think That's, you see, you learn by your mistakes. Yesterday we did it and it wasn't as good. Today we did it and it's much better because because it got better because you and I learned better how to do it. The person who never does anything is the person who, right, yeah. So there you go.
Yes. میگه که کسی موفقه که هیچ وقت کاری رو شروع نکرده. میگه پس نگران نباش. دیشب ما نتونستیم قشنگ خوب چیز کنیم، امشب بیشتر هماهنگ شدیم، دفعه دیگه بهتر میشیم. خب پس من میخوام چند صفحه چیزایی که گفتن و من بگم. من شما صفحه‌شو نوشتم یا نه؟ Thank you very much, Professor. Do you let me to say some translation of your speech for our audiences in Persian?
Yes.
Okay, let me.
Okay.
صفحه شو ببینم کجا بودم. صفحه ندارم. خب. بذارم اشاره درست دارم میگم دیگه. امیدوارم که صفحه‌ام درست باشه. خب من تا اینجا یه مقدار به فارسی بگم چیزایی که استاد گفتن و اولا که خیلی خوشحال بودن، تبریک گفتن نه من خیلی راضیم و از اینکه داریم با شما صحبت می‌کنیم و اینکه گفتن که به همه ایرانی‌هایی که دارن این وایس و این تصویر رو می‌بینن به همشون احترام می‌ذارم، خوشحالم از اینکه دارم با شما صحبت می‌کنم. خب حالا بذارید من صفحه‌اش این صفحه 1 بود. این دوتا که خودم پرسیدم از همینجا سیه. خب گفتن که زیست جامعه شناسی ویلسون رو گفتن سفر تحصیل کرده هاروارد، نظریه ایشون میگن که آقای ویلسون میگن نظریه تکامل رو اومد از نظریه تکامل نه فقط برای فیزیکی که مثلا آدم‌ها تکامل پیدا کردن و مثلا حالا حشرات و اینا مثلا حالا پیشرفت کردن، یواش یواش اومد از خزندگان اومد به پستانداران و بعد انسان به وجود اومد. میگه که نه فقط روی فیزیک بلکه روی رفتار ما اومد زوم کرد آقای ویلسون، روی جنسیت به خصوص روی مورچه‌ها که خیلی هم از نظر خود آقای روز هم جالب هستش. گفت چون مورچه‌ها خیلی پیچیده هستن، زن‌ها و ملکه‌ها، زن‌ها مردا ملکه سیستم‌های طبقه بندی خاصی دارن اونها تو خودشون و این علاقه که آقای ویلسون داشتن رو از مورچه‌ها اومدن روی پستانداران و روی انسان تطبیق دادن، گسترش دادن، اینو آوردش روی اینها اپلای کردن و اینکه انسان‌ها در انتخاب طبیعی تکامل پیدا کردن و مهمترین چیزش این بود که ما ایزوله نیستیم که فقط برای خودمون زندگی بکنیم، ما بیرون میریم، فامیل داریم، بچه داریم، زن شوهر داریم، با هم دیگه تعامل می‌کنیم. مثلا یه مرد یا زن که توی فلوریدا باشه یا حالا هر جای دیگه مثلا میگه که اینها با هم دیگه تعامل دارن، هیچ کسی ایزوله نیست که بگه که من با هیچ کی نمیخوام تعامل داشته باشم. و بحثایی که آقای ویلسون که خیلی مناقشه برانگیز بود، به خصوص میگه بحثمون فقط درباره سیاه‌پوست و سفیدپوستا نبود بلکه خیلی بحث گسترش بیشتری داشت و بحثای زیادی رو ایجاد کرد تو خود آمریکا. این که از نظر ما اخلاق چگونه رفتار میکنیم، این آقای ویلسون گفتن که چجوری ما از نظر اخلاقی رفتار میکنیم، چه احساسای اخلاقی داریم، چرا این احساسای اخلاقی رو داریم، اینا همه در اثر بیولوژی به وجود اومده و اینکه اینها به خاطر تکامل بوده. و گفتن که من خودم با اینکه مسیحی نیستم اما نه آقای روز دوست دارن، خیلی مهربونن. آقای ویلسون گفتن که خود من مسیحی نیستم اما میگم اخلاق چیزیه مثل ریاضیات و فکر میکنم که ویلسون هم درست میگفت که اخلاق بخشی از تکامل هست و ایشون خودشون هم میگن که ما اخلاق داریم و اینکه میگیم مردا مثلا میگفتش که اون میگه که مردا همیشه به زنها نگاه جنسی دارن اما این که اخلاق اما من اینو نمیگم، من میگم که البته این چیزی من در این متوجه نشدم، باید یه بار ریویو کنم اینکه اخلاق کارکرد ولی این تمرکز دارن، یعنی توافق دارن که اخلاق کارکرد تکامل هستش و اینکه خودشون میگن که ما دوستان خیلی خوبی با آقای ویلسون بودیم، همیشه روابط خوبی داریم، مثل کسایی که با هم درگیر مذهبی و جنایی دارن که با هم خوب نیستن نبودیم، ما با اینکه نظر علمی متفاوت داشتیم اما این به معنی عدم دوستی ما نه، ما حتما خیلی با هم دیگه خوب بودیم. باید تعامل کنیم، باید احترام بذاریم، مهمترین چیز انسانی هستش که ما آدم‌های اجتماعی هستیم و باید به همدیگه احترام بذاریم. اینکه مردان و زنان ما هر دومون فرهنگ داریم، اینکه مثلا زنها در ایران روسری میپوشن، دارای فرهنگ خودشون هستن، متفاوته. ویلسون میخواد استدلال بکنه که دختر و پسری که داری اینها با هم متفاوت هستن و فقط به پرورش اونها نیست که اینا متفاوتن. این فقط شانس نیست، فقط پرورش نیست، بلکه توانایی‌های درونی ما هستش. بعد میگه که فمینیست‌ها، مارکسیست‌ها در آمریکا، یهودیان، اینا همشون روی بحث ویلسون بحث کردن، نگران شدن، یعنی مناقشه زیادی ایجاد شد. یهودیان آمریکایی و اونچه که آقای روس میگن که اونچه که ویلسون گفت بسیار بسیار مهم بود در نسل بشر، چیزهای بسیار مهمی درباره ما گفت که ما انسان‌ها از حالا موجودات قبلی تکامل پیدا کردیم، اما میگن که من هر چیزی رو که ویلسون گفت رو قبول نکردم. در اخلاق هم جاهای اون اشتباه کرد، هنوزم من میگم که اون اشتباه میکرد و من خودم هم در اشتباه بودم. شما باید مردم رو دوست داشته باشید. میگه که پدرم مسیحی بود، هفته یک بار به کلیسا میرفت و مسیح میگفت که آدم‌ها باید تلاش بکنن که یه قدم جلو برن. لامارک، خب بعد درباره تکامل و لامارکیزم گفتن که لامارک خودش روحانی بود و میگفت تعداد بیشتری از اونچه که زنده بمونن به دنیا میان. کشاورزها مثلا با پرورش گوسفندان بهتر که شیر و پشم بهتری داشته باشن اونها رو انتخاب میکنن و بعد از چند نسل میبینی که حالا گوسفندانی که باقی میمونن حالا شیر و پشم بهتری دارن. و این نظریه انتخاب رو خودش توی تز خودش استفاده میکرد و مردم میگفت که اینها رو استفاده میکنن خودشون، به صورت ناخودآگاه مردم هم از این استفاده میکنن. اگر 2 نفر رو داشته، میگه که اگر که به همچنین میگفتش که اگر که 2 نفر رو داشته باشین که یکشون خیلی منزوی باشه، بگه نه من اصلا از مردم خوشم نمیاد با کسی رفت آمد کنم و اینا به درد نمیخورن، و یه نفرشون خیلی معاشرتی و اجتماعی باشه، اتفاقا اون نفر دوم احتمال البته ایشون برعکس و من برعکسش دارم میگم اول گفتم که این نفری که اجتماعی تره احتمالاً که بچه دار بشن بیشتره و اینکه آدم‌ها حتی در کار و همکاری با همدیگه هر چقدر داشته باشن موفق‌ترن و اون تناسب بقاشون بهتره، فقط به جنگ و جدال نیستش. نظریه داروین این بود که میخوام تمرکز کنم که اون این درباره سیاست این صحبت می‌کنه که انسان، نظریه داروین هم درباره این صحبت می‌کنه که انسان چگونه تکامل پیدا کرده و اینکه ما آزادی انتخاب داریم. این حق انتخاب ماست که چیزی رو انتخاب بکنیم. مثلا به من گفتن که میتونستی تو فقط علاقه به آشپزی داشته باشی که حالا این گوشت رو چجوری بپزم، ولی خب خودت انتخاب کردی که به مثلا حالا موضوع تکامل علاقه پیدا کردی و حالا به جای که علاقه به اون چیز داشتی، پس این انتخاب خودته. ما the way you behave is part of it. رفتارهایی که میکنید یه بخشیش بس مربوط زیست شناسی هستش، ولی میگه که گاهی مسیحیان میگن که فقط ایمان به خدا کافیه، اگه ایمان به خدا داشته باشی دیگه سیفی، دیگه ایمنی و هیچ مشکلی نیست، مهم نیست چیکار بکنی. چیزی که ما خودمون میگیم که بعضی از مثلا دیدگاهایی که نمی‌پذیریمشون میگیم بعضی فکر می‌کنن حرفا بخورن دیگه چون خدا رو قبول دارن کار خوبیه و دیگه همه چی اوکیه، که ما هم همین قبول نداریم که حالا ایشون هم انتقاد دارن بهش. خب خود جناب پروفسور مشکل نداشتن که تا آخر لایو باشن؟ نه مشکل نداشتن، خودشون دوست دارن. بعد هم که جان اوکی خیلی ممنون. Thank you very much dear professor, thank you very much dear Lizzie. If she's here now,
I will tell her that.
If she's there, please come and join us. Say hello to us.
And my best wishes to your husband too, and say I hope he won't beat you for what we've done today, that he won't hit you, and that he'll let us do it again sometime soon. Okay?
Yes. Right, I hope. Yes, I hope.
Too. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.
How do I turn it off
خب
now?
بچه‌ها کلاس اند کنم.